Hello again. I have a strong suspicion that few people viewing this video will have been exactly reeling in shock over the last few days, since it has been confirmed that the BBC are a bunch of worthless scoundrels who manipulate their news coverage so that left-wing and pro-Arab nationalist perspectives are magnified and enhanced, while those on the right politically are smeared and maligned, along with any Zionists. Before discussing the latest revelations, I must remark that this is nothing new, and it was much the same 50 years ago. A personal anecdote will illustrate the point. In late 1977, I was living in the Galil in northern Israel, up towards the Lebanese border. Things were pretty lively at that time, with the Lebanese war spilling across the border pretty often. I lived close enough to be able to hear the shelling as the phalangists and Fatah fought it out. I had a wireless at that time, which on a good day I could use to pick up the BBC World Service. It kept me in touch with this country. Katyushas, the Russian missiles mounted on lorries, would land in the north and hit towns like Kiryat Shmona and Metula. And at that time, the policy of Israel was not to respond when missiles were fired at their territory, as long as nobody was killed. When people did die, though, then they would launch air raids on the enemy in the areas where the missiles were launched. In November 1977, there were many attacks on Israeli towns in the north, and listening to the BBC, there was no mention of them at all. Finally, 3 people were killed in a town called Naharia on the coast, and then Israel responded by bombing the village where the missiles came from. The next day on the World Service, we were told that Israel had been bombing Lebanon and how many people had been killed. Not a word about all the missile attacks that had been launched and about the fact that Israel had exercised restraint. People relying on the BBC for news must have thought that this was just naked aggression by Israel for no particular reason. They got up one morning and had nothing else to do and decided to bomb a village in Lebanon. 50 years later, and exactly the same thing is still happening. The selective news, the deliberate mistranslation. I've watched the BBC News, and I know enough Arabic to be able to understand that some guerrilla leader is talking about jihad against the Jews. And then I see the BBC translated as resistance to the Israeli armed forces. There has been no change in the last 50 years, trust me. The speech of President Trump, which was spliced, though, is a stunning development, even for an organisation as tricksy and dishonest as the BBC. The joke of it is, of course, that this is all being subsidised by the British public. People are claiming now that this is a watershed for the BBC, but I'm dubious. As I said, they were at exactly the same game half a century ago, and I strongly suspect that in 50 years' time, it will still be business as usual at the BBC.